If you're a real estate investor, the way you handle your properties is about to change, big time. New government regulations might be forcing you to report even your most basic property transfers. Sound extreme? This is not just some far-off scenario. It's real and it's coming fast. So whether you've been investing in real estate for years or maybe you're just now dipping your toes into the rental real estate market, it is critical that you know these rules. I'm Jeff Hampton, asset protection lawyer and founder of STR Law Guys. And I've been around long enough to see the government do some pretty crazy things when it comes to violating your privacy, but this one, when it comes to rental real estate, this one takes the cake. In this video, I'm breaking down exactly what is happening, why it's happening, and more importantly, what you can do about your investments. I'll show you real-life examples and actionable steps that you can take for your assets. And stick around till the end. I'll tell you exactly when these regulations go into effect because they will affect you and cost you much more than you think. So let's start with a scenario that may hit close to home. Let's say you have a rental property, maybe an Airbnb property, maybe just a long-term rental or a multifamily unit. You've done your research. You know that in order to bolster your asset protection, you need to move your property from your personal name into your LLC. I mean, after all, it's a smart move, right? You want to make sure you separate your personal assets from your business assets for asset protection. But here's the twist. Under the new regulations proposed by FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, you making this simple title transfer from your name into an LLC could trigger a tsunami of reporting requirements to the federal government. Yes, even a move made purely for asset protection could now trigger you having to disclose information about the transaction itself and who was involved. Surprised? You're not alone. Many investors have no idea that these regulations were being drafted and approved and set for release coming soon from FinCEN. Now, the whole reason why this was passed, the intent by FinCEN, is to try to stop money laundering and illicit activities when it relates to real estate transactions. We can argue whether this is a noble goal, but like many government regulations, they make a rule to try to stop one thing, and then it ends up actually costing innocent people thousands of dollars. Is it a noble goal to stop illicit activities? Sure. The problem with government regulations, though, is they enact a regulation in order to stop one type of behavior, and all it really ends up doing is roping in a bunch of innocent people like you and I and putting a large amount of reporting requirements on us, which will slow us down and many times cost us more money. So what does this mean practically? Essentially, the moment these regulations go into effect, it could require you to meet new reporting requirements if you choose to move properties from your name into an LLC. And I'm not just talking about filing a little bit of extra paperwork. You may be required to provide comprehensive information and details about the LLC's ownership structure, the actual funding of the LLC, and personal information. I can already read your mind. You may be thinking, Jeff, is there some way that I can go ahead and get out in front of this and make these transactions ahead of time before these regulations kick in? Let me say this, timing can definitely play a crucial role here, but it's not just about beating the deadlines. The real goal here is making sure that we can maintain compliance with these regulations while also meeting our asset protection goals. Okay, so we've covered the reporting requirements if you want to move a property from your personal name into an LLC. But let's take a look at another common strategy. What if you want to use a land trust to keep your ownership details confidential? This has been a go-to method for many of my clients and those that are seeking privacy and anonymity when it comes to shielding their investments from other people's eyes. But under the new regulations, if you don't set up your land trust correctly, you could inadvertently trigger the same reporting requirements for your land trust. I say that because the specifics of how you both set up and manage your land trust are more important than ever. Here's the key. If you want to both maintain your privacy and avoid this mandatory reporting, I'm going to give you two steps. Number one, you need to be both the grantor, and number two, you need to also be the beneficiary of the trust. Two big things to watch out for. Do not name someone else as the beneficiary, or be very careful about selling a property into the trust. Either one of these could then trigger the reporting requirements, and now you have to inform the government what's going on. Look, it's a common oversight. Many people just assume by using a land trust that it creates complete and total privacy and anonymity. But be careful how you set up your land trust, because if you don't set this up right, you could end up under the same reporting requirements as someone with an LLC. So what's the takeaway here? Setting up a land trust is not enough on its own. You must pay attention to the details. And what are those details? Number one, you should be both the grantor and the beneficiary on your land trust. Like I said earlier, this alignment both maintains your privacy and it avoids the reporting requirement. Number two, avoid exchanges of consideration. In other words, do not sell the property into the trust. Instead, transfer it without any exchange of money or value whatsoever. Number three, choose your trustee wisely. Consider using a nominee trustee to manage the trust so that it does not expose your personal information. By taking these steps, you can still use a land trust effectively without triggering these reporting requirements. So let's step back and take a look at the bigger picture. FinCEN is proposing these regulations and moving them forward primarily because they claim they're trying to stop illicit activities, money laundering, gambling, and they talk about terrorism and other type of illicit activities. And they believe that by putting these reporting requirements in place for everyone, it will help minimize that type of illegal activity. The goal is to increase transparency when it comes to who is in control of assets that are held in LLCs. Maybe we're talking about limited partnerships, real estate transfers, and the like. Here's what they're really honing in on though. They're really looking at bank loans that are under conventional financing, so non-commercial financing. So let's say you have 4 units or less, and you're looking at some type of just basic residential property and use a conventional loan. Under these regulations, those conventional loans, which is what most people use for rental real estate, you are now going to be brought in under these regulations, and they're going to want you to meet these reporting requirements. And when I say these reporting requirements are extreme, the biggest problem is they're going to require you to provide your personal information as part of those requirements. The worst part is that FinCEN is proposing that if you don't meet these regulations, they could treat you like they did under the Corporate Transparency Act, where now they could try to invoke some type of daily fines and some sort of maximum penalties that could end up leading you into jail time or worse. This sounds eerily similar to the Corporate Transparency Act. And if you remember, the Corporate Transparency Act was all set up, it was designated for the express purpose of also stopping illicit activities by requiring businesses to report their beneficial owners' information to the federal government. But when it comes to these new FinCEN regulations we're talking about right now, it's clear the federal government wants to know who is behind all real estate transactions, particularly as it relates to conventional financed loans. The worst part of these regulations is that there is no real exceptions carved out for trusts. So it includes LLCs, limited partnerships, and to some extent, unless you set it up properly, you could be looking at trusts being required to report as well. So a good example of this is an investor reached out to me. Her name is Lisa, and she had actually heard about these regulations and that they were being proposed, and of course they could be modified before they go into effect. But she wanted to make sure and get out in front of this, and she wanted to know exactly what she needed to do in order to protect her rental real estate from these regulations. Her goal, she wanted to maintain her privacy and anonymity, but also do everything that she could to try to help avoid or minimize the reporting requirements instituted by FinCEN. So the first thing we did is we set up a properly structured land trust. And in the process of doing so, we made sure that she was listed as both the beneficiary as well as the grantor. Finally, we made sure there was no transfers involving any payment or consideration whatsoever. Now, in order to make sure she had privacy as part of her structure here, she used a nominee trustee to make sure and keep her name out of public records. By taking these steps, she was able to make sure she maintained her privacy without running afoul of these new government regulations to come. So don't let these regulations intimidate you. Even though they're coming up on the horizon from FinCEN, if you know the steps you can take right now, you can immediately start, number one, by planning which of these strategies are going to work for you. And when I talk about that, what do I mean is, if you know you want to maintain your privacy and avoid these regulations, one of the things you can do is properly structure a land trust now. If you have rental properties that you know you need to move into an LLC, you can start planning for that as well and work with a real estate professional, talk with a specific attorney that handles these issues like we do at STR Law Guys, and you can go ahead and plan for that now so that you're not trying to react to regulations that are going to go into effect. Finally, when is all of this going to go into effect? FinCEN is saying December 1, 2025. So as of the time of this recording, we basically have about 13 months before all this gets into effect and begins to actually require you to make these reporting requirements, which is why you have the time to institute a plan right now so that you don't end up running into all of these regulations and all these reporting requirements in 2025. Review your holdings, consult with attorneys that know these rules, and make your adjustments accordingly so that you're ready when they go into effect. Speaking of protecting your properties from government oversight, how do you also protect your properties from greedy lawyers looking to bring a lawsuit against your rental real estate? Check out this next video where I break down how you can protect your rental properties from a lawsuit. See you over there.